So today I'm joined by Ed Grimes. Ed has over 25 years leadership experience, primarily in the food to go, retail, hospitality and leisure sectors. And he's the founder of Grovewood Retail Consultants, as well as a managing director of Zatar. So morning, Ed.
Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. And yourself?
Yes, good. Thanks. Yeah. Good.
Fantastic. So Ed, you've had a number of senior roles in high street brands like Pret and Eat and Rush Hair. So what made you decide to start your own business?
I think probably opportunity. I've always wanted to run my own business and probably never had the guts to do so. I think in the sort of latter part of the corporate career, I started to do some consultancy for some people I was introduced to sort of on the side. And then when the opportunity came up, I sort of realized that actually I could make a go of this. So did it, and probably with a kick up the arse from my wife as well, who's been telling me to do it for years. So that's why, really. And I think also having worked in sort of private equity backed businesses, you realise that yeah, it's a bit of a roller coaster anyway. So you may as well try it for yourself. So that's why, really.
Yeah,
Should have done it years ago.
it's funny you say that. The amount of business owners that I speak to that wish they'd made that jump previously. So
Yes.
how many years have you been in business for yourself then?
I think I started in July of 2018.
Okay.
So yeah, so just over four and a half years. And then obviously pandemic and stuff like that. So it hasn't been the easiest time to work, but it's been fine. It's been good.
Yeah. Great. Well, look, tell us a little bit about your journey, because you mentioned there the pandemic as well. But
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about your journey from sort of starting up your business and your experiences of doing that.
Yeah. So when I first started it, I guess my ambition was always to do operational consultancy, because that's what my background is. I've been, run estates of 120 shops and doubled the size of places, during my tenure. So I always wanted to do that. I guess when you realise that what you want to do and what people want to pay you to do are not always the same thing. So I've ended up doing quite a lot of work in terms of, I guess, using my network to help other businesses grow as well. So I've done some good consultancy projects. I started Zatar, for example, with my business partner, which is a Lebanese startup in London. I built a cafe recently up in Nottinghamshire for a big private equity backed marina brand. So I've done a lot of that, which is what I wanted to do. But I've also done a lot of things that have used my network to raise investment, to do lots of B2B introductions, to get new clients for customers and that kind of thing. So it's been quite varied. I guess I'm not sure I'm answering your question now really, but what I've realized running my own business is it's not always easy to be completely focused on doing one thing, unless you've got I guess like a skill that nobody else has in terms of, like, maybe computer programming or accountancy or something where you could do solely that. I think when you're in my kind of business, you have to be a bit more open-minded, and that's what I've been good at, I think, in order to see where opportunities are and have people come to me with things that might not always be completely obvious as being something I could do or could help with, but then I end up being able to find them a solution. So that's what I've enjoyed, really.
Okay, no, that's great, and just having that flexibility to use the skills and experience that you've got to
Yes.
to help the businesses that you're speaking to. So with that in mind, Ed, what who is your sort of ideal customer? Who would you love to work with?
I guess ideally somebody who needs my help, whatever that might be, but also is happy to understand that they need my help, because it's quite, I spent a lot of time trying to help people who don't want my help or previous years or don't, or think they have the answers already, which is fine. It's up to them. But I think ideally, if you're running your own business, you want to work with people you want to work with. I'm very flexible in terms of what I do, what I can do. I've got a lot of resources. I've got a lot of experience to draw on. But yeah, I'd like to work with people who actually recognise that they need help. Really, that's ideal.
And that's not always an easy thing, is it? Because there's that thing of you know, where we start off of you know, not knowing what we don't know.
Yes, yes,
So
yeah,
it's often that we don't know what we don't know,
yeah,
and it's not until we move to a stage of knowing what we don't know that we start to realize that actually we could do with some help
exactly, yeah,
in whatever
exactly,
particular area that might be.
exactly. I mean, I've been quite fortunate, I suppose, since starting Grovewood, that all of the work I've done has come through recommendation or from people I've worked with before. So they've all gone through that conversation with somebody else, maybe, and that person would have said, well, you know what, you need to work with Ed, or Ed can help you, or have you met Ed? And which, so that barrier is done. So that's fine. That's a lot easier. But yeah, I guess when you're pitching work to people who don't know you and who don't know they've got an issue, that's quite a challenge. And particularly, I guess, in operations, because no one likes to be told that their shop doesn't look good and their coffee service is rubbish, or you know, blah, blah, blah. So I've been lucky in that respect in terms of having a good network of people I've worked with over the years.
Right. Okay. And you know, let's talk a little bit about the impact of COVID-19 on your business and also the businesses that you work with. What would you say was the biggest impact of that?
Well, I mean, hospitality and retail is what I work in, but I'm involved in a couple of 3 tech startups as well that I'm either an investor or a board member of. But they all focus primarily on people within the hospitality sector, either customers or employees. So yeah, so the industry as a whole is hospitality, and obviously, as you know, it's been a nightmare. I mean, we opened Zatar, for example, in September 2020, having signed a lease on a building in January of that year before COVID was like a whisper of it happening in China, but we had no idea what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess it sounds flippant, but there's always a challenge to deal with in hospitality. This is obviously a bigger one than anyone's experienced, but it's always a challenge, and you've got to just keep moving forward. You've got to look at how you can improve things. Don't just keep repeating the same things you did yesterday. We didn't get a decent result, for example. Be resilient, be resourceful. And yeah, again, I've been able to, you know, get some decent business results by being open-minded about what sort of things I do. So I've done some investment raising for startups. I've done some business development for startups. I've retraded Zatar half decently through the pandemic. Yeah, and just keep moving forward, really, which is not always easy, but that's what I've done, I guess. And if you can survive in hospitality, you know, in the last couple of years, then it's a good result.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And how's the pandemic changed the industry that you work in? Has there been anything, you know, specifically that's changed that has come out of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, it's not just a pandemic. I mean, I guess it's a pandemic and Brexit, if we're going to talk about that, and how long you've got, have had the biggest impact on my industry. So, you know, costs have increased across the board: food costs, obviously, ingredient costs, packaging costs, energy costs. And then you've got staff costs, and you haven't got the staff available, so you have to pay staff more to attract them in the first place and then to retain them. So those are all ever increasing burdens, or if you like, or costs on the business. Rent hasn't come down accordingly yet. Hopefully it will do, but it's who knows. But then you've got the risk of knowing exactly where you'll go if you're going to open a new shop, for example, where you're going to open it, because what is what's happened in the sort of local footfall, is that there to stay, or is that going to come back to where it was before? You know, there's so many constraints. So I think what has been the biggest impact of all of that has been, I guess, a leap forward in a reliance on technology.
Yeah.
So if you go back to pre-pandemic, for example, you'd see a lot of food to go businesses starting to use self-service kiosks, for example, but still maintaining that front of house experience from with people. You know, people actually serving, but maybe with 20 or 30% done by kiosks as well. So you had the option. Now it feels like we've sort of accelerated through 10 years of transition straight to everywhere using kiosks. So I was doing a shop visits on Tuesday with a couple of my colleagues looking for new sites. I went into places where there's now no staff. There's all kiosks and there's one person behind the counter. Now, if you think if I come from a background of Pret where service was key,
Yeah.
and I still think it is, the challenge is how you use technology, because you have to. You can't afford to have so many people. You can't access so many people. You have to find some cost balance somewhere. But how do you use technology but not have a service that's completely transactional where you're almost being served by a robot? And that is the challenge. I went into one place, central London, and it was literally like you could have been in Argus, but lunch shouldn't be about that, in my opinion. So I think that's the challenge. It's trying to maintain that feeling where you can be served quickly. You haven't got the issue of not having enough people to serve you, but at the same time you do get that handmade feeling of your food. It's not just like something for the future where you don't where that whole enjoyment has been taken away. So that's a balance.
Yeah.
I guess so hopefully, to answer your question, I think that's where hospitality has gone. It's using technology to make sure that you can maintain the experience that customers were used to.
Okay. And
but enhancing it.
And taking that sort of slightly more forward, what does the future look like for for food and leisure and retail and hospitality? How do you see the future of those industries?
Well, people always need to eat, luckily.
Mm.
And I think it depends what sector of hospitality you're in. So if you're in sort of leisure where people are going to sports venues or indoor golf, that kind of thing, and I've got friends who work in that sector, I think that's booming because people are probably working at home more. So the social side is more key, and it'd be more of an event to go out. If you're thinking of the sector that I operate mostly in for my own businesses, it's where people are actually trying to eat at lunchtime. You traditionally be going after the lunchtime market, for example. That's really changed. So you're then trying to find locations where there's as many workers, as many shoppers, as many tourists as possible, and really trying to focus on that. Now, the impact of that generally would be much higher rental costs for those sites, because you have to go where there's more demand for sites. So then I guess you have even more of a reliance on technology and on menu and making sure your menu works. So that's where it would go. And I think the challenge, I suppose, is making sure that you maintain that customer experience and point of difference, rather than having some homogenized thing where you could be anywhere. And you can see that in a lot of brands that what I just described is happening. So trying to stand out in that environment is going to be a challenge, I think. I mean, traditionally, whereby you might have had a brand that opens in the UK and then does maybe opens 100 shops before they even have to look abroad. I think people are going to now need to be looking at, say, doing 10 or 20 high footfall in London and other cities, and maybe some suburban places where there's lots of home workers, that kind of thing. But also then looking to other cities around the world just to spread that risk and access that market, which is, I guess, where that market is defined clearly is going to be in less places than it was pre-pandemic. If that makes sense.
Okay. And you mentioned there about the brand, the USP, the unique selling proposition, the differentiation. How important is that in your industry?
That's a good question. I mean, it's hard from a brand's perspective. It's important, I think, because you have to stand out. From a customer's perspective, you almost have to try and convince customers that it's important. I guess what I mean by that, when I first started at Pret, it's more longer than I could imagine now, about 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago, it was they had 32 shops, and the customers coming into there were the people who were the early adopters of that kind of food. So it was quite unique. There was nothing like it. Yeah. You roll forward 20 years later, 25 years later, there's lots of different places to go and eat and have a fairly decent lunch. There's so many brands. a lot of them run by people who used to work at Pret with me, you know, so it's all stemmed from there. I can't remember where I was going with that conversation. But there's a lot of places to eat, but you have to try and, I guess, if you're bringing a new brand to the market like we've done with Zatar, you have to try and stand out and convince people it's worth switching from one to the other.
Yeah.
Whereas when Pret launched, for example, you didn't have to do that because there wasn't anything. So you knew that you were if you went to Pret, you get great service, you get great food, it'd be consistent. Now there's quite a lot of places you can go to and get, you know, half decent service, half decent food, and it'll be consistent. So if you're launching a new brand, you have to try and convince people why they should switch from that to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. No, absolutely. And I think
that's harder now than it was because there's more competition, but also there's more constraints in your business because of the cost and the uncertainty and you know, the difficulties in getting staff to your business and that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, look, I completely understand that, and
I didn't answer your question, I don't think, actually.
No, you did, because, you know, look, I think having a point of difference, and, you know, again, with all my clients, I make sure that they have that point of difference, that unique selling proposition, because, as you quite rightly say, and particularly, you know, why I was interested in your industry, it's very competitive, and if there's no point of difference, nothing that makes you stand out, then people are just generally going to go for the cheapest. Well, if I don't see that product as any different to that product, I'll go for the cheapest one. So it's important to have that point of difference, that USP that stands out. And in relation to Zatar, which we've mentioned a couple of times, you describe that as redefining fast food with pure, all natural Lebanese food at pocket friendly prices. So is that your point of difference for Zatar?
Yeah, so I mean, all our recipes are cooked to our founders, my business partner's mother's recipes. So they're all home cooked. We cook everything ourselves from scratch. But then we serve it in a fast food style. So I guess like Lyon, if you've been to Lyon, that kind of style.
Yeah.
So that is unique. And then if you go from a quantity perspective, we're more generous than our competitors, and from a price perspective, we're on a par with. So we've ticked all those boxes, but still you have to tell customers and get customers to cross your threshold, because if they've only got 10 quid to spend for lunch, for example, they'll probably go to the place they've always gone to because they know what they can get for 10 quid. And when finances are more constrained, that way of shopping becomes even more focused. When people have got a bit more money to spend, they can afford to have a substandard or a meal that they're not so inspired by, you know, because they can take a risk, is what I mean.
Yeah.
So convincing customers is much harder than it was. And yeah, I guess the way to do that is to stand out. So, you know, we still have exemplary service, for example. We still give generous portions. We just make sure that our customers are looked after. Yeah. And you have to do that even more than you did before, while still facing the same constraints everyone else faces.
Yeah, it's certainly a difficult and challenging market.
Yeah.
So Ed, what would you say to anyone thinking of going into business now, you know, from your experiences?
What now is in the climate now?
Well, just
economically.
Just generally, anybody that's out there that's thinking about starting their own business, what would you say to
them? I'd say certainly if that's something they want to do, they should go for it. You know, what's to lose? I think the important thing is to remember the importance of the people you've worked with before. So your network, that's where all your, well, it depends what business you do, obviously, but that's where a lot of your work is going to come from. A lot of your recommendations will come from. It's very rarely the people you think are going to help you, but do actually end up helping you, I found. So, you know, it's more often people from left field who come up with the most support for you, which is nice, but it can be disappointing because you expect people who would have worked with you or would have helped you to help you, but they don't always. I think keep a very open mind. I think a trap, because you got to make money, obviously. So a trap you can fall into, which may be one that you can't avoid, perhaps, is that you do something for the money because you need to make the money, but you end up not enjoying it and finding yourself almost in the worst of both worlds. So if you can avoid that, avoid it. But if you can't avoid it because you need the money, then do it with an open mind, I suppose, and knowing that you're going to have to go through some emotional pain to get the result. And I guess for what I've been doing, it's really a big focus on lateral thinking, really. And you know, if someone comes up to you with an issue, then thinking, okay, well, that person, I can't help with that person, but I do know someone who can. You know, and it'll all be about, you know, your network and who you've worked with in the past, and you know, people you might work with in the future who will help you. That makes sense.
Oh, some fantastic advice. I like that. Yeah, sort of surrounding yourself with the right people, being open-minded.
Yes.
Yeah, and look, you're absolutely right. Enjoy what you do as well.
Yeah. Not. I don't always live by those rules. But yes, that's what you should do. That's what you should do.
We need that. We need that constant reminder, don't we? Even,
yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, look, one final question, Ed. What's the best advice you would give to an 18-year-old you?
I give its advice to 18-year-old me quite a lot. Is yeah, if you think you're working hard at school, work even harder. And if you have something that you dream of wanting to do at that age, I think at 18 you probably do have a pretty decent idea what you want to do. And if you do have it, then give it your all to try and get it. And if you end up not getting it, then at least you've tried. I haven't lived through that, unfortunately. I did want to do something which I didn't work hard enough, haven't done. But I guess if to tell you a quick story, my nephew is always wanted to be a chef.
Okay.
He at 14 would cook most fantastic meals. His parents are big you know, foodies, as am I. And he got to 17 and he was doing his A levels, and he clearly didn't want to be doing his A levels. He wanted to be a chef. And I managed with my wife to convince his parents that, you know, if you want to be a chef at 17, you're far better doing it at 17 than you are when you're 27, because you've got all the horrible hours out of the way. You haven't got the burden of kids and mortgage and blah blah blah. So do it now. So they compromised. He did 1 year of his sixth form, got an AS, I think, in German, and then left. And now he's a sous chef in a Michelin-star restaurant in Switzerland.
Wow.
Living his dream. And you know, so that's what I would say. If you have a passion, go for it, and don't sort of be compromised of having a backup plan always, because it's not always beneficial.
Yeah. Great. Again, great advice, Ed, and I love the story there. That's fantastic. Yeah. So no, thank you for that. So look, Ed, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today, and it's been really, you know, interesting, and you know, finding out more about you, about Grovewood Retail Consultants, about Zatar, and you know, about your journey, and also about the, you know, the industry that you're in. So, you know, thanks very much for sharing that.
No, thank you, pleasure.